Hi there, welcome back to McCall's Quilting Parisian Grace Quilt Along. I'm Laura Roberts. I'm just so glad you're here today. Today is really exciting because today the quilt gets assembled, or at least most of it does. So we're going to start by assembling the center. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that you need to know to do that. So first of all, in order to assemble the center, you're going to see that you need to cut some really big triangles. And the way that's done is you cut a big square, and then you cut that in half diagonally. And I'm going to show you how that works because when you're cutting really big squares, it can be kind of a problem. So this is a treat that I had bought for myself. You may want one as well. This is a 20.5-inch square ruler. So when I'm needing to cut a 17-inch square, a 16 7/8-inch square, which you're going to be using for the big triangles, it makes it really easy. So this is a really fun thing to have. Now, when you do that, after you cut these squares, you're going to have to cut them diagonally. Well, if you're cutting a big square, and you will also be cutting big squares for the, when we get to the binding tape, which we're making for the applique stems. When you get to that point, you're cutting a really big square, 22.5-inch square. So how do you cut that diagonally? Because think of the ruler you'd need. Well, a couple of things. One thing you can do is actually butt rulers up against one another like this. So if this big ruler were my square, I could put one of these rulers way down in this corner, like that, and then put the other ruler against it, like that. Do you see that? It essentially gives me this huge ruler, okay? And then what I can do is just align it like you would any ruler, moving it as one unit, making sure it stays really tight right there, and then you have it just right for cutting, right? So that's an easy thing to do, and it's not going to cost you anything more because you probably have a couple of rulers, all right? You can also use the marks on your mat here. If you look at these, I'm just going to get that out of the way. If you look here, you're going to see that the mat is numbered. You have numbered squares, and you can put your fabric on there and then put a ruler on the line so it covers the fabric, goes from one to the other, and cut along there, and just do that on all sides, making sure that you're using a 22.5 or 16 7/8-inch square on the ruler. So there are multiple ways to cut big squares, but if you're like me and you want to kind of just have fun, get yourself a couple of big rulers, all right? So the next thing I want to show you is one of my favorite tips ever. So, something I discovered out of necessity, and I'm going to share it with you. I have over here some slacks hangers or skirt hangers. And if you look, you'll see, what these are like. It's where you have multiple places where you can hang. You see that I've got 4 bars to hang? If you have a small sewing room, or if you're sewing in your dining room, and you have cut all of these border strips, you've been piecing these blocks together, well, you've got it all nice and neat, and then where do you put them, right? You can't leave it on the dining room table. Whoops, there we go. You can't leave it on the dining room table because the cat will get on it. It'll get all wrinkly, you'll be sad. So what you can do is hang it in the closet. You've got everything cut out. These are 90-inch border strips, and a 90-inch strip, how do you keep that tidy? You've been so careful when you're cutting to make sure you don't have any wobbles. And then where do you put it? Because you're going to cut it, and then how soon after that will you be using it? So this is something I like to do. And I'm going to pull my other one over here now. Okay, there we go. So here's another one. It's the same idea. It's just sort of a prettier version with those little white shells. And I'm going to take off of here the things I'm going to be using. And you may notice, okay, I also have my little my little strips for the applique hanging on there. And I'm going to take off what I need to make a couple of corners. I'm just going to have these laying here. Okay, keeping them all tidy, like that. And then I'm going to get this one down again. There we go. And I'm going to take off that first block row that I pieced, like that. And I get to hang everybody else back up, including my narrow border strips. There we go. Just like that. So this is one of my favorite tips. It's invaluable in terms of being able to hang things in a closet where the kids and the cats and everybody won't get at them. So just think about that. You may already have hangers like that in your house. Alrighty. Okay, so on to assembly. You've made your blocks, and you're going to see that you're going to be making 3 rows with your blocks. You'll be sewing your blocks in order, and it's going to be like this. I want you to take your blocks and put them on a design wall if you want to, but what you're doing is you're going to look at the diagram and you are going to put together 3 rows of 3 blocks each. Although the middle row, in place of a block, you have that 15.5-inch square of the tan print. So you're going to sew 3 blocks together, 2 blocks and the single square, and then another 3 blocks to make those 3 rows. Once the rows are together, you're going to sew the rows to one another. Again, you're going to be keeping an eye. Make sure you have everybody in the right place. Make sure that you have the frames where you want them, if, you know, which frame you want where, and you're going to sew those together, and that's going to make that quilt center. It'll be all ready to go, and then we're going to add the big triangles. All right? So let me show you how to piece those big corner triangles. All right? Here's my first block row. I'm just going to set that aside over there, and I'm going to bring on a big triangle. Isn't that huge? It's a great big triangle. Okay, this is my E block, and I've already sewn triangles here to make it that great big piece triangle. And I'm going to show you how to do that on this F one over here. But just so you know, one of the things you need to be watching is how you position this big triangle. Because believe it or not, you can sew it on wrong. You could sew it on like that. Or you could sew this one the way it is, and sew this one like that. And that would be a problem. So just be aware of how you're going to be, which direction where it's going to be oriented. The other thing is, really starch this thing, okay? These are really well starched, and the reason is because you have this very long bias edge, and you want it to be able to, you want to try and keep it so it's not moving a lot, because when you're sewing a big long seam with that kind of a bias edge, starch is really your friend. Starch is your buddy here. So I'm going to show you how to sew the small triangle onto the block to make a big triangle. Okay, here's my F block. I've already put one triangle on, as you can see. There we go. Now, I'm going to make sure I have this oriented in the right way, and it goes like that. Okay, that's pretty obvious now, isn't it? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to fold that over here, and what you're wanting to do is align the corners. Let me move that. Can you see that? You're aligning the corners. You're starting there. Don't try to align from the end with the small point. You want to align up here. So I'm just going to get those corners just right, and I'm going to grab a pin, and I'm just going to put that pin in there like that, just to have it the way it's supposed to be. And I'm just going to sort of gently tap it down in place, and I'm going to put another pin at the other end, just to keep things happy, okay? And you're going to see a little dog ear here, just like you always do. That's how it's supposed to be. You want that dog ear there. Okay, and a little tip for you. Before you sew this triangle on, grab a ruler and check the size of your block. At this point, when it's just raw edges, it should be 16.5 inches square. If you find that your block is, close to that, maybe it's 16 3/8 or 16 5/8, that's fine. You'll be able to ease it in. If you have a real difference, if you've got a 17-inch block or a 16-inch block, you're going to want to go back and adjust seams because you really want this to be the right size at this point so it'll work for you. Another thing to tell you is that when you sew this together into the big triangle and it goes onto the quilt, it's going to seem like it's too big because what happens is the big center area, that big center diamond that's made of the 9 blocks or 8 blocks in a square, that floats. And I'm going to show you what that means. It's all it means is that the corners don't go all the way out to the border. You've got this little float out there, all right? And that's what you're going to have here. So if something is seeming a little bit too big maybe when you're first cutting it or when we're piecing it on, don't worry, that's how it's supposed to be, okay? So I'm going to take this over to the machine and sew this seam. Alrighty. I am going to put it into the machine this way so that I have the all my little intersections right side up where I can see them, okay? So I'm taking that pin out because this pin I put in, I'm just gonna, don't want to sew over it, and I'm starting right there. Oops, there we go. Okay, so my corner's aligned right there. Get my glasses on so I don't sew through my fingers. Okay, making sure that's aligned. I just work it a little bit. There we go, all set. And I'm just gonna stitch down here, you know, as you normally would. And I want to make sure that I'm stitching through those little intersections like that. And I want to make sure that I'm aligning here, that that is aligning with the raw edge. Okay, I'm just going to make sure. There we go, that looks fine. I'm just going to stitch on through here. Use that, whoops. There we go, go right on through there. And just keep going like that, making sure that kind of flattens. All right, I'm just going to reposition. When you have this big of a seam or this big of a piece you're sewing on, you're going to want to reposition once in a while. Okay, now you see how that tan is sticking out there? I really don't want it to do that. So I am going to either lift that over, or I can do what I'm going to do here, which is just kind of pull that tan there, have that tan disappear. Okay. All right. Going right through where the intersection is, so my point's pretty. Okay, there we go. It's really kind of fun to get to this point where your blocks are actually getting incorporated into the whole quilt. I love this part. Assembly is my favorite part. That's because, you know, you wait, well, I can't wait to see how it all goes together, and are they going to be pretty together, and they will be. Okay, here we go. So you have 4 of these big triangles to make with your E and F blocks, and this is your both E and F blocks. So you have 4 altogether plus the triangles. You cut 16 and 7/8 inch triangles. You know, it's a 16 and 7/8 inch square that you cut into triangles. Okay, let's get that last pin out of the way. And right here, you see right there where that little V is, where the dog leg is there? That's right where I'm aiming. And so right through there. All right, okay, so that seam's done. Oops. And we'll just snip the threads. There we go. Okay, come over here and open it up. And there you have it, my second big triangle. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and press this seam right here, and that's easy enough. Now, if I were pressing on the mat, wouldn't that be sad? Oh, I don't know anyone who's done that, but I did kill a mat by leaving it in the car once. Oh, big tip. I was moving, it was midwinter, it was very, very cold, and my teenagers were helping me move. And one of the boys put my great big, really expensive, fabulous cutting mat, just kind of tossed it into the back of the truck. Well, it was in the 20s. It was very cold. And did you know that when you have a very cold mat, if someone then picks it up and kind of throws it, it shatters into a million pieces. Don't let anybody throw your mat around when it's cold. All right, there we go. Now there we have it. Now this is the second big triangle, all ready to go. I'm going to show you how to sew them on now. Okay, I'm going to start with the triangle that has the E block, because that's that upper left of my quilt. There we go. I can't bring the whole quilt here to show you because it would never fit. So I'm just going to show you with using the one row that I have here. And here's that great big triangle. So you can see that this triangle, this huge triangle, has a midpoint. It's the corner of the block. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? Okay, well, when you're sewing it on here, you can use the midpoint of this block as a place to sort of get them together, as a good reference. So I'm just going to follow the grain of the fabric with my eye. It goes right out over here. Okay, I'm going to grab a pin. I'm just going to mark that for myself. Okay, right there. Oops. Well, I know that that's where I want my center to be, like that. And then I'm going to bring this over like this so I can handle it. There, right? Like that. If you get the center part right, then it's really easy to get everything else positioned. Okay, I can see that. It's working right there. Okay, and I'm just going to pin like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to gently lay this out onto the rest of the block. Don't pull this. Remember, this is bias, this edge. If you start pulling on it, it just becomes almost unmanageable. So if I'm going to pull on anybody, I'm going to pull on the blocks, because the blocks are not on the bias on that outer edge. And I'm just going to gently make sure that I don't have it gathered underneath it in any way. And again, I'm going to have a dog ear sitting out there. And I'm going to put a pin in there. Come on. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing at the other end. Okay. That middle pin being there means I can move this around and it won't affect this side at all. Okay, so same thing, making sure that that's out where it needs to be. Okay, that I don't have anything gathered up or held in the wrong place. There we go, like that. Okay, I'll put a pin through there. All right, I'm only going to use those 3 pins, okay? And here's what's really cool. You're sewing that big triangle to the framing that you put, those little frames you put around your blocks, which means you're not having to match any points. The only point you have to match is that guy right there, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and sew. I'm going to have the triangle side up, and I'm going to sew this on. Now, when you're actually doing this at home, you'll have that big 8 blocks plus center square unit, that great big center, it's now a diamond. You're going to have that whole thing here. It's not a problem because it's going to be to the left of the machine when you're sewing, but just kind of know it's going to be there and not worry about it. All you have to worry about is what's right under that presser foot. All right, so put another little thread thingy. Okay, and here we go. I'm bringing my great big triangle over here. If you want to put more pins in, of course you can. I'm not trying to say that you may not put in more pins if that's what makes you comfortable. Especially because it's bias, a lot of people prefer more pins. But I don't really prefer to have a ton of pins around because I guess I just don't handle it as well as I'd like to. With pins I can sew over them. Okay, so this one, I'm just going to start right along the edge using my 1/4 inch, just like that. Okay, and I am going to use the needle down. If you have a needle down function in your machine, it's really fabulous because then you can sit here and you can arrange and everything else and it doesn't go loose. It just stays right where you have it. Okay, I've got that arranged. I'm aligning my raw edges. There we go. And I'm just going to stitch away. Get that edge aligned again, like that. Okay. Remember, don't pull on this bias edge. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Making sure I get those raw edges just the way I want them. Okay. There. Did you see how I had to kind of move that a little bit? I just had to play with it. And as I said, you're welcome to put in more pins if that's what you would prefer. There's no problem there. Okay. That's not there. Come on. Be a good thingy. There we go. I do talk to fabric. I talk to fabric. I talk to my quilts. I talk to the machine. Certain people in my house just think I'm a little strange. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm coming up to that point, that one and only point in this whole seam, and I'm going to get that pin out of there. And just make sure that that intersection is going to go right there into the needle. So my point is where I want it. There we go. All set. And I'll just keep on stitching this. Oops. Wait till you see this opened up. It's so pretty. Okay. Okay, just about there. Okay, make sure it's just right. I'm going to grab my little awl. There we go. That looks fine. I'm just going to sew right off the end, like that. I can't wait to see it. Okay, let's bring that up. Get my scissors, just trim these off. Like that. There we go. Now let's take a look. Oh, pretty. Look at that. Ha ha ha. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, it's so exciting when you get to this point. Okay, so I'm going to grab that little ironing board pad. It'd be really super if there was some way to have a huge ironing board and have you just kind of run around behind me in the studio, but there isn't, so that's why we do it this way. Okay, I'm going to close this again and set that seam. Just kind of, you know, just a little heat. Press, don't iron. The difference is, of course, you know, up and down versus side to side. Okay, and then I'm just going to open that, oops, like this. Okay, there we go. Isn't that beautiful? And at home, of course, I would do the whole length. I would press the seam like that, and then go ahead and press it open. A little awkward here, but this way you can see what I'm doing. There, look at that. There's our point. Okay. So let's do a little bit more, and then I'm going to put the other big triangle on the other side, the one I already made with the F block. I'm going to do that because I want you to know what it's going to look like when we get to the float. Okay, so we'll pretend I did a really good job of pressing the whole thing. Okay, and now I'm going to get this out of the way again. And I have one corner done. And if I were going to be doing this, I'd have this whole side done, but I just want to show you what it's going to look like when you get ready to sew this one. You would match the center again, just like you did before. And what that means is that when you get out here, you're going to have these crisscrossing, just like you would if it were a tiny piece. And it's going to be just about like that, okay? And when you sew along like that and open it out, it's going to look just perfectly normal. Okay. Okay, so I would pin along like this. I'm going to add another pin along here. And I'm just going to sew a partial seam now, just so you can see what that looks like when it's opened. Okay? There we go. I said we don't have huge amounts of room. Okay. And you can't come in here and follow me around, much as I would like to have you come in here and follow me around. Wouldn't that be great? Ha! I would love that. Okay. So I'm going to come back to the machine. Same old, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to grab one of these guys and run it down. I still have that my needle down thing in there, and I'm going to keep it that way this whole time so I don't skew something. Okay, and here it goes right under there. And just a normal, do not sew on the pin. Okay. I'm just going to run on down here like that. Okay. And a little bit more. It's so much easier to sew when you are sewing onto these frames because you're not having to deal with all those match points. There we go. Okay, that's probably far enough to show you what I want to show you. Up, 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 up. You ever talk to your fabric? Do you talk to your machine? I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not. Sometimes what I say to my machine isn't, necessarily polite, but it's not usually the machine that's doing it, it's me. Okay, and here you go. Now I wanted to show you something here. Do you see how that is not a full 1/4 inch out? Okay, if you get that and it's not a full 1/4 inch out here, this raw edge, go ahead and unsew and move it further down and do it again. If I had that fastened at the center and put out from there, that wouldn't be there. But if you ever have something like that, unsew. Just take it apart. Remember I showed you how to use a rotary cutter to do that. Makes life really super simple. Okay, so that is all sewn on like that. We're pretending it's all sewn on. And there you go. That's how you make your big triangles and sew them on. So what I want you to do, you're going to sew them, all 4 of them on. Now, the best way to do it is, if you look at the quilt, you have the E blocks in the upper left, the upper left end, but once it's on point, it's the top and the bottom, the F's are to the sides. They're opposite one another. The best way to do it is to sew them that way. So you would sew both E triangles on first, then both F triangles, okay? And when you have those all sewn on, you can start with the borders, which I'm going to show you next time, all right? So that's your homework. Go ahead, sew your blocks together along with that 15.5 inch square in the center, and then you're going to make your big triangles, and you're going to sew those on and give it a really good pressing, and next time I'm going to show you how to get going with the borders. So thanks for joining me.